I've created the primary and secondary color correction for this look, but now I want to give each of my 3 shots a unique framing. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to create new remote or local grades. So let's talk a little bit about what a remote grade is in DaVinci Resolve and also what a local grade is. So if I right click on my image here, you notice I have local versions and remote versions. Basically what a remote version does is it allows you to make an adjustment to a look for a specific clip, and then it will ripple or apply that adjustment across all of the timelines and all of the clips in your project file that are connected to that remote version. Now usually this is a huge time saver because it allows you to make an adjustment once, and then that adjustment is applied across all of your different shots that have that same look. However, there are times when you want to make specific adjustments to clips that are connected to each other. And in order to do that, you either need to create a new remote version or a new local version. Now, the difference between a local version and a remote version is, just as it sounds, a local version is specific only to the timeline that you're working in. So if you create a new local version, it will only be available in the timeline that you're currently working in. It won't be available project-wide. But a remote version will be available project-wide. And if we sort of switch our timeline here and we switch back to the master timeline, and I right-click on this clip, you'll see that I actually don't have the option for remote versions. I only have a local version. And one way you can sort of think about remote versions is that it's just the local version of the master timeline. So any adjustments you're making to the master timeline are sort of being rippled out to all of your other timelines within your project file. Let's create a new remote version so you can see how this works in practice. So I'm going to switch back to my edit here. And this last clip, if I want to make a new remote version, I'm just going to right click, go to remote versions and say create new version. And this is going to give the option to name my version. So I'm going to call this version Bird by Gully 2. Say OK. And you'll see that once I've done that, the red arrow has sort of disappeared. But if I click back on one of these other clips, you'll see that these 2 clips are still connected. So any adjustment I make to these 2 clips will ripple across the 2 clips, but this clip is now a standalone clip. So any adjustment I make to this clip will only be contained within this clip. And so to show you how that works, if I zoom in here on the image, sort of readjust that, you'll see that I've changed my sizing. But unlike before, when I click back on these other clips, you'll see that it hasn't affected the first 2 clips because it's not linked to them anymore. It has a new remote version. And if I right click on this version, you can see I have a couple of options for remote versions. I have version 1 and I have Bird by Gully version 2. And I can easily add clips back in or take clips out once I've created my versions. So if I want to put this back into the collection of version 1, I just hit load, and you'll see the red arrow has reappeared, and now these 3 clips match each other once again. But if I right click and load the Bird by Gully 2, you'll see right away it brings back the sizing that I created for that version. I can also apply this new remote version to my other clips simply by right-clicking and selecting the version I want to add to it and clicking load. And now you'll see that I've applied this version to the first clip as well. And so using remote versions is how you set different looks for footage that is connected in the same shot. This can be particularly useful if you have a long take, such as a documentary film where you're outside and the exposure changes, or the cinematographer adjusts the exposure halfway through the shot, and you need to make different adjustments for different portions of the footage that you're correcting. So understanding and using remote and local versions in DaVinci Resolve is incredibly important, and it's what really allows you to save a lot of time when you're color grading in the program. But while it's a very powerful tool, it's also important to understand how and why it's working so they're not accidentally adjusting clips or changing settings that you don't mean to be altering when you're working in a project. And so that's a quick overview into remote and local versions. I hope that this series of tutorials has been helpful for you. And as always, thank you so much for watching.